Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. My presentation is titled Discrimination Against Special Populations, Lessons from Arizona. Discrimination happens when individuals are treated unfairly based on identity traits like gender, disability, or race, and it remains a serious issue across healthcare, employment, and social systems. In behavioral health and social services, discrimination doesn't just affect access to care, it affects trust, treatment outcomes, and a person's overall mental well-being. In this presentation, I'll focus on two real examples of discrimination that occurred in Arizona within the past few years. The first involves the LGBTQ community and the exclusion of gender-affirming healthcare. The second involves an autistic and ADHD worker who faced discrimination in the workplace. We'll look at what happened, what changed afterwards, and what these cases can teach us about fairness, inclusion, and advocacy in behavioral health. The first case centers on Arizona's transgender community. For years, Arizona's state employee health insurance plan explicitly excluded coverage for gender-affirming care, classifying it as cosmetic. This meant transgender employees could not access necessary medical procedures through their health benefits. In 2019, a transgender state employee supported by the ACLU and Lambda Legal filed a class action lawsuit arguing that the exclusion violated federal and anti-discrimination laws. After several years of legal proceedings, a federal judge approved a consent decree in 2023 that permanently removed this exclusion from the health plan. This outcome marked a major step forward for equality in healthcare access, not only for state employees, but as a precedent for other public and private employers across the country. Following this ruling, Arizona is now prohibited from ever reinstating that exclusion. Transgender state employees now have the same access to medically necessary care as everyone else. Beyond that, the case has had ripple effects. It raised awareness across the U.S. about how health policy can discriminate, sometimes without intention, against marginalized groups. Advocacy organizations have since used this case to push for more inclusive healthcare policies in other states. From a behavioral health perspective, equal access to healthcare directly supports mental well-being. When transgender individuals know their care is protected by law, it can reduce anxiety and depression and the fear of institutional rejection. This case shows how policy reform can play a major role in supporting psychological safety and inclusion. The second case highlights discrimination faced by neurodivergent individuals, those with autism or ADHD. In Buckeye, Arizona, a Subway franchise hired a worker who disclosed that he had autism and ADHD. He asked for reasonable accommodations to help him perform his job, things like clear instructions and extra time to adjust his tasks. But instead of providing support, his employer failed to accommodate his needs and terminated him after only 4 shifts. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, investigated and filed a lawsuit in 2023, stating that the employer had violated the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. This law protects workers from being discriminated against because of disability. The case reminds us that neurodivergent individuals often face unnecessary barriers, not due to inability, but due to lack of understanding and support. Although this case is still being resolved, it's already having a positive impact. The EEOC's involvement drew national attention for disability rights and reinforced the responsibilities employers have under the ADA. It also sparked broader discussions about neurodiversity, the idea that cognitive differences like autism and ADHD are part of normal human variation. When employers and service providers understand neurodiversity, they can create more inclusive environments. For example, clear communication, sensory-friendly spaces, and predictable routines can make a huge difference for autistic individuals. In behavioral health settings, the same principles apply. Understanding a client's neurodiversity helps professionals adjust therapy approaches and build stronger, more supportive relationships. Both of these cases reveal how discrimination can show up in healthcare and behavioral health environments. For LGBTQ clients, discrimination might look like a therapist using the wrong pronouns, making assumptions about identity, or showing subtle bias. For autistic clients, it might mean a provider who doesn't adapt communication styles or ignores sensory needs. These issues can make people feel unsafe, leading them to avoid seeking care altogether. To prevent this, behavioral health workers need ongoing training in cultural competence and inclusive communication. This includes learning affirming language, understanding disability accommodations, and practicing cultural humility, which means being open to learning from each client's lived experience. Even small adjustments, like providing flexible session formats or using visual supports, can help create a more inclusive and equitable environment. These two Arizona cases can and should shape how we train behavioral health professionals. The subway case teaches the importance of understanding disability accommodations and neurodiversity, while the gender-affirming care case shows how systemic discrimination impacts mental health and access to services. Training programs should use real-world examples like these to help future clinicians identify and address bias. They should also emphasize intersectionality, the way multiple aspects of identity such as gender, disability, and race overlap to shape experiences of discrimination. By integrating these lessons into behavioral health education, we can foster more empathy, accountability, and advocacy among professionals. Ultimately, the goal is to move beyond awareness and toward action, creating systems that protect everyone's right to fair, compassionate care. To wrap up both of these Arizona cases, one involving transgender healthcare rights and one involving workplace discrimination against a person with autism, highlight how discrimination still affects people's access to opportunity and care. But they also show progress. Through advocacy, education, and legal action, individuals and communities can bring about meaningful change. As behavioral health professionals, our role is to carry those lessons forward, to recognize bias, challenge inequities, and provide inclusive, affirming care for all clients. By standing up for justice and compassion in our everyday practice, we help create a future where no one is excluded because of who they are. Thank you for listening. Here are the key references I used for this presentation, including the EEOC's official report, the Associated Press coverage of the Arizona Consent Decree, and scholarly resources from the APA, SAM, HSA, and NAMI. Thank you.